it seemed like the more I started to develop myself individually, the more intense the unhealthy behavior became on their part, where I was being blamed for things and everything would be a problem. And so that was kind of, I guess, the dynamic between myself and my parents for a while.
Sorry, babe, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
You could.
Okay, I was just going to bring it back just a little bit. You said at the beginning that where you wouldn't have had these descriptors, but what you started noticing was from the book. Remind me of the book again.
The Science of Stuck by Britt Frank.
The Science of Stuck. You said that that's the first time that you heard the terms like triangulation, projection, parentification.
Mm-hmm.
For somebody that's just listening to this and be like, okay, what are those? What does that mean? Would you mind getting into those just a little bit?
That's a great one. Let's get into triangulation, because that's one that I think is oftentimes not really, it goes under the radar. We don't, it's one that's kind of hard to see and navigate, even though it's kind of obvious once you see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So triangulation, as far as I know and what I've learned, it's basically talking about another person behind their back, sort of when they're not in the room, to someone else. And, this was kind of the root of one of my aha moments, understanding that I had trust issues. I had issues trusting other people and really feeling okay with that. Because throughout my childhood, my parent would consistently vent to me, not only about their problems, whether they were financial problems or personal problems, but also about problems within their relationship with my other parent. And so, I was very young and we would be having these very mature conversations, and he would just kind of be talking to me about things that in truth you should never speak to a child about, especially about their other parent. And that was one of the things when I realized when I first got into my relationship with my husband, when we would be apart, I was so fearful that whoever he was with, that they were saying bad things about me, that he didn't really want to be with me, that he was, all of these things were just kind of, it was intrusive thoughts. They were racking my brain. And it wasn't until I read about triangulation and I understood how that can make you feel throughout childhood, it made these insecurities in my adult life that much clearer. And so, yeah, essentially, I think triangulation is just sort of this intentional manipulation tactic that a narcissistic parent can sometimes use for their own benefit to kind of shape their child's opinion of another person for them. And that was definitely the case with me, where I felt compelled to share in my parents' opinions of other people.
Yeah.
Feeling every word of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can both relate to that one a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting too, because, and I'm sure you can probably relate to this in some way, but there's that's a really good example of really toxic behavior, or really, it's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also something that when I say naturally, it's not like, oh, I came by it naturally, but I unconsciously repeated that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that, until I had awareness of it and actually saw that that's what was taking place and that that's what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Just like anything else, right? Awareness is the first step. But do you have anything like that where you see maybe you have awareness of something, and then it's easy to see it externally from yourself, and then the more processing and the more work and kind of the more sitting with it, you start to see some of these behaviors pop up in yourself and how they're manifesting?
Oh, absolutely. Like you said, awareness is the first step, and it really does give you so much clarity moving forward. Once I started to understand what these different things were, it was clearer to me how I had been sort of subconsciously embodying some of those same behaviors, which can be a really uncomfortable feeling to sit with and to admit that within yourself, that you were treating someone that you care about in a way that you're no longer proud of now that you have this knowledge. But recognizing it is really important. And, going back to triangulation, I think a great example of that sometimes is, let's say you're dealing with a narcissistic parent and they don't want you to have a close relationship with your other parent. They can sort of say things to that other parent that you told them in confidence about them. It's this communication triangle to kind of divide two people. And so I remember early on in mine and my husband's relationship, I had such severe separation anxiety. I have a fear of abandonment. That was something that I learned along the line. And so I found myself kind of pointing out different negative aspects of my husband's friends. And it wasn't for a while that I realized the reason that I was doing that, I think, was to dissuade him from going out, from leaving me, essentially, because I was convinced that when we were apart, either something terrible was going to happen and we would never see each other again, or he was speaking poorly about me behind my back. I was so fearful, I think, and self-protective that that was absolutely something that I did. And I don't even know if I was aware of it for a while. I think it was later on down the road that I started to realize there's nothing wrong with these people. These are good people, and yet I was nitpicking any little thing that I can find to sort of eliminate what I viewed as a threat, I guess, in my life.
So this is fascinating to me because it's having awareness of an unconscious thing that's happening, right? Mm-hmm. Once you have awareness of it, because we get this question all the time from people where it's like, okay, great, I can, I recognize it now, but what do I do with it next? Mm-hmm. Like, how do I change this thing, especially when it's something that's happening kind of unconsciously and behind the scenes? So what have you been able to do? What does that process look like for you to kind of shift up that behavior?
Well, I think for me, so much of it has been knowledge. I think when you're dealing with any sort of healing from emotional abuse or manipulation, knowledge is power. Because once you can start to put words to these different feelings, you can understand where they're coming from. And I think even that, understanding that there is a why a lot of the time to your behavior, throughout my childhood, I didn't really understand that there was any sort of a distinction between myself and my emotions. I just felt like everything was happening to me, and this is the kind of person that I was. I was very set in my ways, I think. And as I've gotten older and I've started to understand more about mental health and trauma and the long-term effects that that can have on you as an adult, I've been able to kind of trace back some of these different behaviors and triggers and understand them so that now when they come up, I can recognize them. And I think recognizing triggers and understanding, being able to acknowledge your emotions is so helpful in learning how to manage them. But I also do think that, there are times when you can read about something and you can try to put these things into practice, but it's not until you experience something or you feel a certain emotion, or maybe that you've sort of lived a certain amount of life. I always compare it to sort of like a character in a video game that is silhouetted. You haven't unlocked them yet. And so it's like, that they're there, but you can't quite see all of their features. And then something happens and it's like, wow, okay, now I'm ready. I'm at this next level. I can see this for what it is and, sort of implement this into my life moving forward.
I love that metaphor.
Yeah.
I love that example. That one's good.
Thanks.
We were meant to be.